brainstorm with a friend. It's often easier to discuss ideas with a friend or a group of friends than to try to sort of, have an artificial audience in your head or the one on your paper. So what you do is you sit down with your friend or your relative or your teacher and let your ideas flow freely. Try to, as we say, think outside the box. Take notes on what you've discussed. At this stage, don't throw out any ideas. Even if they sound really silly, jot them down anyway, because they help get you out of the block and into the zone, and that's what you want. Hold a discussion with yourself if no one else is around, addressing an imaginary audience. It's a lot of fun to sit around talking with friends. It's a lot more fun than it is to sit and write. So you want to be sure to keep this brief. You don't want to sit with your friends for 3 or 4 hours when you should be writing. Don't spend any more than 5 or 10 minutes, because after that, you've probably exhausted all of your ideas and you're just having a good time. Try it yourself. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and try this second technique. Brainstorm by having a conversation with a friend or even by yourself, and take notes to prepare to write an essay on this topic. Quote, "Animals are such agreeable friends. They ask no questions. They pass no criticisms." George Eliot. What is your position on this? Support your views with relevant reasons and examples from your experiences. Now, my notes, of course, are going to be different from yours. When you're finished, come back. Don't spend any more than about 3 to 5 minutes on this. Animals are such agreeable friends. They ask no questions. They pass no criticisms. That's your topic. Now, personally, I don't like pets. I've had pets, haven't found one that I like. I'm sort of one of those grouchy anti-pet people. So here's what I said to myself. Pets are dirty. They shed, they damage houses. Pets are dangerous. Dogs bite, cats scratch. And pets are expensive. They need shots and food. They get injuries and illnesses. Now, if you're a pet lover, you probably went exactly the other way, and you probably said that pets are great friends because they offer you love and they offer you affection and they never criticize you. But regardless of whether you like pets or you don't like pets, by having a conversation with a friend or a conversation with yourself, you've broken through writer's block and you've gotten your ideas down on paper. Technique 3 is change genre. Remember that a genre is a type of writing. Genre can be fiction, nonfiction, poetry, drama, and so on. If you don't have an assigned genre, change genre. So for example, if you are supposed to write an essay or you think you want to write an essay, perhaps you can recast that as a poem or a story. Now, even if you can't turn it in the recast form, if you write it briefly in the recast form, that will usually serve to unblock you. So for example, if you have to do an essay, you write it as a poem, then you redo it as an essay, you've gotten yourself back on track. So now what I would like you to do is a quick exercise in changing the way that you look at a topic. Imagine that you wrote this poem, but now you've got writer's block and you're stuck. Break through the writer's block by rewriting this poem as a short story. When you're finished, come back. Here's my story version. My shadow follows me all over the place. I don't think he's any good at all because he just jumps all around with me. But there's something really strange about my shadow, something eerie that I can't explain. Sometimes he grows very tall, but other times He's so tiny. Isn't that baffling? If that wasn't bad enough, my shadow doesn't even know how kids play. You make me look stupid, I tell him, because you don't give me any breathing room. It's like you're glued to me. If I were you, I said, I'd really be ashamed to be such a coward. Last Tuesday, I got up really early, so early that the sun hadn't even come up yet. It was pretty dark. Guess what I discovered when I went outside to play? My shadow wasn't there. He had left my side, likely staying in bed. I'm glad that he listened to me and decided to let me play all alone, but I did feel strange without him at my side. After all, before this, we had been inseparable. I wonder if he'll come back later when the sun comes up. Now, in my story version, I maintained the suspense of the poem. In the poem, the child doesn't realize that the reason the shadow isn't there is because there's no sun. The child also doesn't realize the reason why the shadow stays so close to him is because of the position of the sun in the sky. So I maintain that by saying things like, he grows very tall, but other times he's so tiny. Isn't that baffling? Because the child doesn't understand when the sun is straight ahead, directly above him, there's very little shadow. When the sun is on the side, there's a very long shadow. So I kept the suspense, I kept the humor, I kept the mystery, but I added some dialogue, and I added some different words to break through. By changing the poem to a story, I'm seeing things in a different way. This relieves my writer's block because it enables me to break through to a different genre. So whether I'm writing poetry or short stories or essays or paragraphs, it makes no difference. By recasting it in a different form, I'm able to look at the material in a different way. That helps relieve my tension and anxiety, and that relieves my writer's block. The same techniques will work for you. Try it yourself. What I'd like you to do now is pause the program and try this assignment. You may choose any genre that you like. Here's your topic. Great achievements involve great risk. Construct an argument explaining your position. As you develop your argument, support your position by providing at least 2 examples. Don't worry if your examples are different from mine. And when you're finished, come back. Great achievements involve great risk. I would recast this as a narrative, which is a story about somebody taking a risk and becoming a success. Or I could write a poem about a personal hero who took a risk and made the world a better place. What's very true about genre is that most of us, most of the time, write essays because essays are what are assigned in school. So if you try something that's not an essay, for example, a poem, even a song, you're going to find yourself being unblocked because you're using a different part of your brain. The same is true with technique number 4, change your point of view. Point of view is the position from which a story is told. The 3 main points of view are the first person, the third person omniscient, and the third person limited. The first person point of view is when the narrator is one of the characters in the story. The narrator explains events through his or her own eyes and uses the first person pronouns I and me. Third person omniscient. The narrator is not a character in the story, but rather looks through the eyes of all characters, using the pronouns he, she, and they. Omniscient means all-knowing. The third person limited is when the narrator tells a story through the eyes of only one character, using the pronouns he, she, and they. Most of the time, you'll be writing in the first person or the third person omniscient. Try switching them and see what happens. For example, Laura Ingalls Wilder, the woman who wrote the Little House books, was very, very blocked. She just couldn't get it down on paper. And the reason was she had written them in the first person point of view using the I. And she found that she was much too close to the story because the first person didn't give her the distance that she needed to view the events of her life objectively. So she switched it to the third person limited, and that gave her the distance that she needed to tell her story. Here's an example from Pride and Prejudice. This is the original text. "My dear Mr. Bennet," said his lady to him one day, "have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?" By let, by the way, the author means rented. Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. "But it is," returned she, "for Mrs. Long has just been here, and she told me all about it." Mr. Bennet made no answer. "Do you not want to know who has taken it?" cried his wife impatiently. That's in the third person. Now we're going to rewrite that to the first person. We're going to make Mrs. Bennet the narrator. "My dear Mr. Bennet, I said to him one day, 'Have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?' Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. 'But it is,' I returned, 'for Mrs. Long has just been here, and she told me all about it.' Mr. Bennet made no answer. 'Do you not want to know who has taken it?' I cried impatiently. Now notice I left the Mr. Bennets the way they were. I could have changed them to "my husband." Now I'm going to change it to the first person with Mr. Bennet as the narrator. "My dear Mr. Bennet," said my wife to me one day, "have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?" I replied that I had not, because I wanted to tease my wife. "But it is," returned she, "for Mrs. Long has just been here, and she told me all about it." I still made no answer to make her even more annoyed. I really enjoyed doing this to her. "Do you not want to know who has taken it?" cried my wife impatiently. Well, as you can tell, I made significant changes to this version. First of all, I used the "my wife" rather than Mrs. Bennet. Second of all, I added all this editorial comment. I replied that I had not because I wanted to tease my wife. I still made no answer to make her even more annoyed. I really enjoyed doing this to her. Now I've made significant changes to the story. Do I like this? Do I not like this? I don't really know, but I know that it's really served to unblock me because it's freed me to deviate from my original text. So as I change point of view, I'm also changing different details as I continue to write. And this illustrates how changing point of view can help unblock you by freeing you to make all sorts of other changes in the text. Will you keep the changes? Will you not keep the changes? That's up to you down the line. But the important part is that you freed your imagination to express your ideas in several different ways. And so later on, you can go back and decide which way you're going to choose. So now what I would like you to do is pause the program and try this yourself. Choose a paper that you've already written. Rewrite one or two of the paragraphs from a different point of view. When you're finished, come back. How did this work for you? Obviously, your writing is your own, but sometimes rewriting something from a different point of view can help you overcome writer's block. I just want to add a warning here that's very, very important. Back in the old days, when Jane Austen wrote Pride and Prejudice, she sat there with paper and pen. So when she changed something, she would just cross it out or start a new sheet of paper. Today, with computers, what we tend to do is we keyboard over our documents, and that destroys the original document. If you're going to use this technique to break through writer's block, be sure to open different documents. So call it, for example, version 1, version 2, version